Hello, Maniacs. It's your host, Matthew, and welcome to another episode of Cult Classic Mania. Before this episode starts, I would first like to say I hope you had a great New Year's and a safe one at that. And secondly, I would like to make an announcement that there is new setup coming, and I am so happy. You don't have to hear my terrible Apple headphones through a mic setup with no interface. That's right, I'm using a temporary setup right now, but I should be getting a new setup within the next 2 episodes, hopefully. But for now, I'm using this awesome setup, and just listen to the sound quality. Listen to the clarity of my voice. It sounds amazing, doesn't it? I am so stoked, and I'd like to also say that I will be having a possible guest in the near future. I haven't decided on what movie we're going to talk about yet with him, but I'll be looking forward to that. And but yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode of Breaker Breaker from 1977 with Chuck Norris.
I wanna believe in things I can't see. Explore the unknown and try to sing in key.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cult Classic Mania, a podcast dedicated to the low-budget disasters that we all know and love. Not all of them are low budget, but some of them can be disasters. I am your host, Matthew, and if you're just now tuning in, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the show. This week's episode, we are talking about Breaker Breaker from 1977, directed by Don Hewlett. And I know that wasn't one of the choices for this week's episode. I have a bad habit of just spewing off names of movies and then just end up not doing them. I think I said either Invasion USA and Firewalker, I believe, and I hinted at the fact that I might want to do Invasion USA, and everyone's like, no, that movie is fucking terrible. Do not cover Invasion USA. But everyone decided, Breaker Breaker is a better choice because who doesn't love 70s trucker exploitation films? Don't get me wrong, though. I fucking love this movie. I love anything with Chuck Norris, honestly. Even if it's the worst Chuck Norris movie ever, I'm going to watch it. Like, Breaker Breaker is the epitome. And it's even Chuck Norris's, first big, he's not a villain type of role. And even for an amateur actor like him, he's still kicked ass. It's his typical Chuck Norris, I'm a karate badass, It's showing all of his great characteristics. And as a side note, before going into this movie, whenever I was doing my research on it, apparently Chuck Norris only did this for $5,000 in total. And that was on the wiki page for the movie. I'm not sure if it's true or not. I tried to search around to see if it was confirmed. But I did the math on it from 1977. $5,000 today would be the equivalent of maybe a minimum wage salary in the worst parts of the South. It shows that he was hungry as an actor and tried to put his best foot forward, even though the director wasn't all that great and it was his first director debut. But more on that later. But yeah, this was directed, like I said, by Don Hewlett. He was known, his only other director credit was Tennessee Stallion. I believe that came out about 1983-ish. He was more known as a music composer, I believe. And it was written by Terry Chambers, and his only real writer credit was The Dark Dancer besides Breaker Breaker. Like I said, this movie, the only main big character in it, of course, was Chuck Norris. This is pre Chuck Norris stash. This is pre Chuck Norris memes, everything you know about Chuck Norris today. Think of Chuck Norris as we know him, just stripped down. That's Chuck Norris for that movie. It was released April 1st, 1977 by Paragon Films, and the budget for this movie was about $250K. Yeah, they didn't put too much into it, but they made quite a lot back in the box office. So basically the plot of Breaker Breaker is that JD, who is played by Chuck Norris, he is set out to save his younger brother Billy, played by Michael Augustine. Billy, he is stuck in a city called Texas City, and of course he needs help from his big older brother, Chuck Norris, and he is playing the karate, truck driving, arm wrestling badass. He holds many belts and many titles apparently as this world-renowned truck driver. Like I said before, I really enjoyed Breaker Breaker and Chuck Norris movies in general. It may seem like I'm going to be shitting on Breaker Breaker a lot, but I honestly do love the movie, and shitting on it is the best way that I know how to talk about this movie. I do encourage you to go watch it, and I do encourage you to go back and I know this is like his first big role as a non-villain character, but go throughout his entire filmography and just check out his movies. You won't be disappointed. I can assure you. And most of his karate stunts are done by him. He doesn't have a double to help him out with him. He's the one doing all of the karate stunts, similar to like a Bruce Lee. Yeah, let's dive right into this thing. Breaker Breaker, it was set as a trucker exploitation film, sort of like in the 70s. There was a short period of Smokey and the Bandit came out, so let's try to make a bunch of movies that are similar to Smokey and the Bandit. And a majority of them failed, rightfully so, because just because you put out one popular movie doesn't mean the rest are going to be popular. You see that with trends all the time, but people try to do it anyway. And this is the most 70s movie that you can possibly get. Like I said, this came out in 1977. It's always that weird transition where you're going into the next decade where people are like, all right, this fashion's really bad, this music sucks, and we need a new transition period, but we don't know what to do, so we're just going to keep wearing the same clothes, listening to the same bad music, and watching the same bad movies. That's, in essence, what Breaker Breaker is. All the montages that you have within this movie, there are so many driving montages in this movie that it's insane. Like, half of the movie is just driving montages, and I'm not talking about, like, action montages, but just like there's this one scene where it's Billy, he's just driving down the road, and it's like a 2 or 3 minute montage of him just driving, listening to terrible country music. Yeah, this movie starts out with a Judge Trimmings. He has found a new city, and he is naming it after his dead son, but he just mentions that his son is dead. He doesn't really explain how or why. I guess it doesn't really matter, but whatever. He explains that he's named after his son Howard. His nickname was Tex, but that's all we learn about him, like I said. So they're going to be calling the town Texas City, California. However, I don't know why, but for some reason there was at one point where they said Kansas instead of California. I don't know if it was just a dialogue issue or what. All right, whatever, just ignoring that. And they also don't mention anything about that either. And while this is all happening too, before this, they're saying like a little prayer, and they're all chanting it together. I'm honestly like 99.5% sure that they're all cousins, and this is like some weird religious cult going on. And it's not really explained, but they all look alike, and they're all mentally challenged. They all act like they're idiots. I'm sorry if I offend anybody by saying that, but they honestly do. If you look at any of them, and most of them have unibrows, and they all just look like Arnie from What's Eating Gilbert Grape. That's probably the best way that I can put that. It looks like Arnie from What's Eating Gilbert Grape, but with a unibrow. This movie was supposed to be taking place in present time in 1977 when it was released, and this town looks like it came out of a Western. It's seriously like they have an old school style bar, and they have an old jailhouse. It really does. It looks like it came from an old Western. Yeah. After that weird cult introduction, we get a title card, and then soon after that, we're introduced to Billy, who is again played by Michael Augustine, and we also learn that he is JD's younger brother. And this just shows a random scene where Billy is riding around his dirt bike on a track. He looks like he's racing with people or just doing it for fun, but whatever. And we learn that JD, who is, again, played by Chuck Norris, he just got back from a long haul. And there's this weird little brother-brother fight play. And they're just having fun, blah, 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 saying hi to each other. After JD and Billy catch up, they soon pull into a restaurant/truck stop. And this is where JD is letting Billy go on his first trucking solo run. And, Billy asks, what am I hauling? And JD responds that he's hauling TV dinners. And I'm not sure if maybe I'm too young for this reference, but he says, we're hauling TV dinners, and they say together, if it's from Shelly, it's going to be good for your belly. And then off Billy goes into the sunset, and off Billy goes to his destination with the delivery. While Billy is going off on his first trip, it cuts to JD. He's back at the restaurant. He's talking with some redneck, and I apologize, but I didn't get his name. He was kind of annoying, and I didn't really pay attention to his dialogue. But he's meeting with some redneck, and he's basically asking. He heard about the rumors of Texas City, California, and how bad it could be, and how it could accidentally end up going through there. And basically, the redneck is basically explaining that there's a hardened sergeant there. His name is Sergeant Strode, and they're Judge Trimmings. They don't play by the book. For some reason, this is where it gets really weird. While they're both drinking coffee, just minding their own business, Chuck has this nice old Caesar salad that he's enjoying, and his buddy's just drinking a coffee. A really random group of people show up, and this group is led by a man. His name is Kaminsky, I believe, and they randomly challenge him to an arm wrestling match. I don't know why. I guess it's an ongoing thing that happens at this truck stop, and people are chanting JD on. They're like, "Oh, you're the world-renowned arm wrestling championship. You need to kick his ass. Blah blah blah. You'll win." And I'm just like, that's a random addition to this plot, but whatever, just go with it. Also, I forgot to mention like I said, there are a bunch of driving montages within this movie. Like I said, before all of this happens, before Billy makes it into Texas City, there is this long driving montage of him just listening to the worst country music that you could ever hope for, and just jamming out to it, driving along into Texas City. And then a cop races up to where Billy is. He basically pulls in front of him and tries to stop Billy. He says, "Hey, you probably shouldn't take that way into Texas City, California. You should take this route." And basically Billy's like, "Oh, that's too steep for me. I can't really go up that high." And he says, "Oh, it's fine. You can take that route in with no problem." And lo and behold, the minute he gets into Texas City, he is met with the Sergeant Strode. And meanwhile, all of this is happening back in the restaurant. They are again showing this weird random group of people. There's this one dude, the main guy, Kaminsky. He is wearing a fishnet tank top shirt and very tight jeans with weird cowboy boots. There's another dude that's got like a chef's hat on, and it's like he's a chef, but he's not actually a chef there, I think. And another dude is dressed like a pirate for some reason and has a parrot on his shoulder. Yeah, it's just a random ass group of people that don't belong together at all. But yeah, they're back at the restaurant. They're taking wagers on this arm wrestling match. While this is happening too, it cuts back and forth between him and what's happening to Billy. And this is when Sergeant Strode has apparently arrested Billy, and they take his rig to the impound. They don't show any of this except for whenever they're taking his truck into impound. We're back again at the restaurant where Kaminsky and JD are starting to arm wrestle. Again, why are they arm wrestling? I don't understand. Whatever. Long story short, JD wins. Kaminsky is a sore loser, apparently, and this is when an all-out brawl just pretty much starts, and everyone goes apeshit. And I believe the one of the waitresses, she gets up and grabs a lunch tray and bashes it over Kaminsky's head, and all hell just breaks loose. And this is when you get the legendary Chuck Norris karate fight. He's just going all out, just beating the shit out of everyone that gets in his way. Meets up with Kaminsky and just bashes him right in the nose. And he says, "I don't have time for this. I gotta go find Billy." At this point, poor Billy is at court, and he is waiting for trial. And basically, the judge, it's a really alarming sentence that he tries to give Billy. And he either asks for $250K in bail or 250 days in jail. None of those seem fair whatsoever. That's an alarming sentence for just a petty crime. All he was doing was speeding. That's what they arrested him for. And they said that he was resisting arrest, which he wasn't. That sergeant was just an asshole. But whatever. Billy is enraged by his sentencing, of course, and like any rational human being would, he pulls out one of the bailiff's nightsticks and he beats both of the bailiffs down and pushes the judge out of the way. And for some reason, jumps out of a glass window when he could have just ran out the door. But whatever, it's an action movie. Who gives a fuck? And he just jumps out of the window, fully bloodied, and they chase after him. And eventually, they catch up to Billy because he knows that either he's going to go to jail or, since they don't play by the rules, they're just probably going to kill him. While all this is happening, after Billy gets sentenced and everything, it cuts to JD, and he's just randomly giving two men karate lessons. I don't know why, but it's whatever. And he gets a phone call from the Highway State Patrol, and he's basically checking up on Billy and told JD that he never showed up to the wait station so he can go on to his next destination, and that he could possibly be in Texas City. And the State Patrol said, they don't play by the rules. You have to go find him. So what does JD do? He goes after him, of course. He sets out in his 1975 Ford Econoline badass blue van with an eagle airbrush to the side, and it's got like a 4-inch lift. This thing is the pussy wagon, and that he probably gets laid a lot. I guarantee you Chuck Norris probably gets laid a lot in that van. That thing is a chick magnet, of course. So, of course, he sets out immediately going into Texas City, and like I said, he's greeted by these two morons that clearly don't know how to shoot a gun, but are trying very hard to keep JD away. But, of course, JD, Chuck Norris, he never dies, and he gets away. And whenever the two idiots that shot at his van, I guess whenever it hit him, I guess it caused the radiator to go out. So as he's making his way into Texas City, he stops into, I guess it's a makeshift car repair shop, and he's like, "Hey, I need to get my radiator fixed. Can you please get it fixed?" And we're met with this mentally challenged gentleman. His name is Arnie. Yes, his name is Arnie. Just, yeah, similar to What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And he says, "Yeah, my brother, I believe his name is Wade. He's like, my brother can help you get it fixed and running. He knows how to fix everything. Blah blah blah." And he's like, "All right, that's great. I'm just gonna leave my van here, and hopefully you can get the radiator fixed." And he's like, basically hinting at that he needs to file a police report. He's like, where's your police department at? And he's just like, "Oh, it's down the road. He's got to go this way, blah, blah, blah." And this is led up to where he meets the drunken bozo Judge Trimmings, a.k.a. the man that is sort of qualified to be a judge and the founder of Texas City. He is clearly inebriated. He has downed an entire bottle of wild turkey. How, I don't know. And he's still able to speak and talk normal sentences. And I guess he's talking to a bartender. I'm pretty sure this bartender is also a prostitute. I'm not really sure, but whatever. And also while this is happening, before he shows up, they're talking to each other, the woman behind the bar and the judge, and he's like quoting Romeo and Juliet. I'm 100% certain this guy has never read a book in his life. Also, I didn't write all of the names of the people that lived in this town because honestly, I was so annoyed with most of the characters that I did not give two shits about these people. But I tried to get as many names as I could. But anyway, whatever. After this happens, JD leaves, and these two idiot cops that find Judge Trimmings, and they eventually tell the judge that the kid that the judge was just talking to, his name was John Dobbs, a.k.a. JD, and his last name and address is the same as the kid Billy. The judge and possibly the prostitute are still drinking wild turkey like it's nothing, and they put him on, and they charged JD with a corrupt charge, the charge that he didn't deserve. And he says, charge him with evading a speed trap. Again, even though he didn't do anything wrong whatsoever. These cops are just corrupt, and the judge is a moron. And of course, JD isn't happy with what's happened so far, so he walks on into the small town diner in Texas City, and we are met with the waitress Arlene. She is an attractive blonde waitress behind the counter, and JD seems to like her from the get-go. I forgot to mention in the beginning, but JD, Chuck Norris, he wears the same exact outfit throughout the entire movie, and it's the same. Like I said, it's the same outfit, and it's all denim. Everything, like he's wearing a denim jacket and denim bell bottoms and boots, and a really yellow and ugly bright shirt, and he wears these cheesy looking driving gloves no matter what he's doing, and especially when he's fighting, he's always wearing them. But yeah, he takes off his denim jacket and sits down at the counter. JD, he tries to flirt with her too, but the cook behind the counter, he's just, again, all of these people are total dicks right from the get-go, no matter if they've ever talked to JD or not. And the cook behind the counter isn't having it, so he's just an asshole to JD the entire time. And eventually, because JD is trying to order a donut, that's all he's trying to order, and some coffee, minding his own business. And eventually JD just gets pissed off, and he leaves the diner. But, of course, we're met with more awful people, and these two bozo cops from earlier find JD, and they start fighting him for no reason. It's really abrupt. I don't know why, whatever. And it's the quickest fight scene in the world, by the way, and JD just lays them both out, and he runs away. Luckily, JD, he is running out of town, trying to get away from these people, and Arlene just happens to be driving around and finds JD. Arlene says, "Do you still need to use a phone?" And JD's just like, "Nah, I'm kind of giving up on that idea," but he gets in her car, and they drive away back to her place. And while they're at Arlene's house, they're wanting to get to know each other, I guess. There's this weird little love montage that happens. It's a weird little side plot, and there's like a good 2 to 3 minute montage of them just talking through a field, and this romantic music is playing, and it goes on for literally like 2 or 3 minutes for no reason at all. It's really strange. Back in the great town of Texas City, there is a hall meeting hosted by the illiterate drunk on wild turkey judge, and they're just going over basically a bullet list of what happened that month in the town. And this is where they go more in depth on their supposed moonshine operation. So if that doesn't get any more redneck for you, what will? Anyway, but JD, he interrupts the meeting by kicking open the door. And of course, the drunk asshole judge isn't very happy about it. And they're facing off eye to eye. They're looking at each other. And out of nowhere, he says, sometimes force is necessary, and get him. And the town hall, the people in the town hall meeting just start moving the chairs and just start beating the shit out of JD. But luckily, JD, he never dies, so JD just kicks everyone's ass. And while this is happening, by the way, all these people, they are all disgusting. They're gross. They look like they haven't showered in at least a month, and they all have unibrows, and they look like they're possibly related. I'm not the one to judge that part, but I'm pretty sure they're all related, because everyone's calling each other cousin, everyone's calling each other brother, or my uncle whatever, or my brother Wade, whatever. I'm pretty sure all of them are related. I'm like 99.5% sure that they're related. JD kicks all their asses. They run him out of the town hall meeting, and somehow JD breaks the roof of the building, and he's able to climb up. And of course, these people are all stupid, and they're like, "Where'd he go? I can't find him." And all JD did was just jump on top of the roof. There's also another fighting montage where he's just running throughout the town and just kicking everyone's ass again. But everyone's just like hiding in the most obvious spots, and they're just in plain sight. They're not being clever at all. And they just jump out and try to beat JD's ass, but JD always wins. And he is able to find his van where it is parked behind a barn, I believe. And he is driving throughout the town trying to evade the cops and the idiot townspeople. And I also forgot to mention, anytime there's like an action montage going on, there's always this terrible banjo music, and it's literally the same banjo music playing throughout the entire movie. It doesn't stop. I can't remember who the country artist is, but he's one of those country artists that try to get into the whole, whenever the whole trucking exploitation thing was a thing. He tried to make music geared towards that, but it never really happened. But yeah, there's just banjo music just playing the entire time a montage happens. Luckily, JD evaded the cops, and it cuts back to JD hiding at Arlene's place. And his van is parked behind the house in a barn away from the cops. And it shows him laying in bed with Arlene, asleep. And he has a nightmare about Billy. Billy had apparently escaped jail and his nightmares. And the bozo cop that originally arrested him tried to shoot at him. Again, I didn't get any of these rednecks' names except for Wade and Sergeant Strode because, again, these people piss me off and I don't really care about their characters. But it cuts to a redneck loading a small helicopter, and he's loading it with gallons and gallons of gasoline. Not putting it in the actual helicopter, but just loading it with gasoline for some reason. And, the pilot who's in it is trying to radio, and Sergeant Strode says that he is in the sky and he sees JD's van behind Arlene's house. And while all this is happening, JD is eating breakfast with Arlene and her son. The son mentions that they found a suspicious amount of Shelly's TV dinners. Arlene and her son say that dumb slogan in unison again, and they say, if it's from Shelly, it's good for your belly. And this is where JD runs out of Arlene's house because he realizes this is where he might be able to find Billy's truck. And this is when he goes to the impound lot where the rig was originally taken. JD makes it to the impound lot, and the chopper is still in the air searching around for him. And he is trying to evade the chopper while also still trying to avoid the unibrow redneck that runs the impound lot. And the pilot and the redneck shouting at each other, and they're not very far, but obviously the engine is too loud for them to be able to shouting each other and be able to hear them. And they're just arguing at each other. And he's like, the pilot is still trying to hang out from the helicopter without using the CB radio and just shouting at the redneck that's on the ground. And it's funny. There's no way that they possibly could have heard each other, but they agree on whatever that they're talking about. I honestly was barely paying attention because I was just laughing at the fact that they're trying to yell at each other. And the guy that owns the impound lot, the redneck with the unibrow, they eventually catch JD and they knock JD out with a thing of sheet metal and throws JD's body into the impound machine. Luckily, JD gets out. While this is happening, the judge and the two bozo cops are back at Arlene's house. They're having a very uncomfortable interrogation with Arlene and her son, and the judge is just weirdly groping the child, and I don't know why he is, but whatever. It's really awkward and painful to watch. Whatever. There's an argument between Arlene and the judge, and for one reason or another, the judge says, "Hey, take the child," and one of the bozo cops takes the child, and the child bites one of the bozo cop's fingers, and the Arlene's kid is able to get away. And when the judge is in this argument with Arlene, he sort of looks like Jack Nicholson from whenever he started to go crazy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And he is progressively getting more and more drunk as the movie goes on. How, again, he's always just carrying around a bottle of wild turkey, or he's carrying around a flask. So something tells me this man has a bit of an alcohol problem. It cuts back to our boy JD. He's not having a good day. He's really not. And he goes back to that sleazy bar, and he's asking, where's Judge Shermy's at? Where'd he go? Again, this woman behind the bar, she may be a prostitute, I don't know. She is really rude to him, and her husband walks in holding a shotgun to him, and the husband tells him to leave. And as JD is walking out, he is greeted with the town idiots, and a mob is formed around him. They somehow make a citizen's arrest by throwing JD in jail for killing their redneck cousin George. Oh yeah, with how professional I am, I forgot to mention that. Back in the impound, the way JD is able to get away, he ends up killing I guess his name is George, and I wasn't really paying attention again, and he kills him at the impound lot, and that's why they throw him in jail. The version of this movie that I was watching the commentary version. It was a comedic commentary, and one of the comics was mentioning that the guy that was throwing JD in jail, he looks like Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, like mid-2000s Eddie Vedder. Yeah, I thought that was just a little funny tidbit. He honestly, if you look and pause the movie, he just looks like a really gross, down on his luck, like he left Pearl Jam Eddie Vedder. He was able to get away from the possible pedophile judge, and she gets away and finds the bozo's cop. And the way she gets there, she gets there on a dirt bike and finds Sergeant Strode's police cruiser. And she gets on the CB radio and says, "Hello there, are there any truckers out here near Texas City? He's in jail and they're going to kill him." And all of the truckers respond saying that they want to kick some ass instead of just, calling the police, but whatever. And it says, "You don't want to mess with these truckers," and apparently all of them know who JD is. Again, I didn't know that there was a thing where, like, you're a world-renowned truck driver. It's just a job. You're not world-renowned truck driver, but apparently everyone knows him and they think he's a champion, and they're going to save him. Meanwhile, our boy JD is, again, down on his luck and in jail, and the Eddie Vedder redneck doppelganger, he is watching the jail, tells JD to get out of his cell, and they walk away slowly, and with him walking in front of that Eddie Vedder lookalike, and this is when he might get got, but he doesn't. He's able to get away, and he's able to get away because Arnie, the mentally challenged boy, he's apparently related to this guy, the guy that looks like Eddie Vedder. I guess it's his brother, and he tries to warn him about something, and the redneck doesn't listen, and somehow the Eddie Vedder redneck, he shoots Arnie in the stomach and ends up killing him. And it's honestly funny. Like, I know it's horrible they shot him, but it's honestly hilarious. There's this awfully dramatic death scene, and they're just trying to say something to the Eddie Vedder lookalike, and it just dies mid-sentence. And then the redneck tells JD that Billy is actually in his barn, and he's sorry that he caused all this havoc. And finally, JD saves the day. He is romantically reunited with Billy. There is this weird intimate scene between the two. It looks like they're actually a couple, and they're about to make out. But that is broken up when the truckers are still going throughout the town and just fucking everything up in this town. Rightfully so. This town does not deserve to be around. And JD, once again, is stopped by Sergeant Strode when he goes back to the barn. And Sergeant Strode attempts to fight JD one last time. But JD prevails and thankfully kicks the sergeant's ass. And while this fight is going on, the helicopter redneck pilot is still trying to get up in the air. And the truckers, they stop him from trying to get in the helicopter by basically just ramming into his helicopter and blowing up immediately. And by the way, every time something is like, anytime someone collides into somebody in some type of vehicle, there's always this dramatic, typical action explosion. It's not necessary, but fuck it. We're just going to cause shit to blow up because we can, and it's on our budget. And again, it does this every time. But these truckers aren't having it. They're not done fucking shit up. When it cuts to another trucker and they go to the judge's house and they just ram right through the judge's house. And, it cuts back and forth between this and JD and Strode facing off again. Apparently, the final fight, he just hasn't had enough and tries to kick his ass again in the final battle. They angrily greet each other at a horse ranch, I believe it is. And it shows Strode sitting on the stump of the fence, drinking, again, a bottle of wild turkey, because that's all everybody just drinks in this movie, apparently. And there's this dramatic fight scene, and this entire fight scene, by the way, is all in slow motion. And Strode breaks the bottle of wild turkey on the fence and faces off with him. And while all this fight is happening too, it randomly cuts in between the fight and this horse just running around in the ranch. I don't know why. It's just going back and forth dramatically for no reason at all. That annoying banjo music that I mentioned is just playing over and over on loop again. And the battle finally ends by JD sending off his signature slow-mo flying kick to Strode's chest and knocking Strode on his ass. And this is where the movie ends. Texas City, California is shown being burnt down, and that annoying speech that the judge gave in the beginning is playing, and immediately the credits just roll. I don't know if anybody is like this, so they just watch until the end of the credits. But the credits for this movie was hilarious. The ending of it says the characters and incidents portrayed and the names used herein are fictitious, and any similarity to the name, character, or any history of person is entirely coincidental and unintentional. I think we can probably guess this movie was not based on a true story. Man, I know it seems like I'm dogging on this movie again, but I am, but I also love it. I love this movie, honestly. It's one of those movies where you can just sit back and relax and just enjoy it. You don't have to think too hard about it, and you don't have to criticize it to the death and just like, oh, there's a plot issue here. No, it's just a fun Chuck Norris kick-ass action movie, and that's why I love Chuck Norris movies in general. You don't really have to think too hard about the movie. You don't have to criticize it. You just have to kick back and enjoy a typical Chuck Norris action movie. And you don't have to tear it apart, like I said. And, Chuck Norris is an enjoyable actor, too, to watch. Like, he doesn't wear many hats when it comes to acting diversity. He just plays the karate guy. He's known as the karate guy, but it's fun. Again, don't criticize him. He just does what he does, and he doesn't give a shit because it's Chuck Norris. But I'm gonna stop there before I go on a whole why I love Chuck Norris rant, basically. And but yeah, that was this week's episode. I was Breaker from 1977, directed by Don Hewlett. You can find it on Amazon Prime. I believe I paid $1.99 for it. For some reason, I had to pay for it. I couldn't find it anywhere for free. Unfortunately, I actually had to pay for this movie. It was on Tubi, but it looks like they took it off for copyright reasons or something like that. And there's a version on YouTube, but it's in Dutch. I started to watch the YouTube version. I'm like, I don't understand anything these people are saying. And then I looked at the little caption underneath, and it says, this is translated in Dutch. And I was like, oh, that's why I can't understand it. Yeah, that was this week's episode. And next week, I think I'm going to do a sci-fi movie. I actually made my choices before I recorded this episode, so these choices are actually definite, and you can find them online where I don't have to search for it and then realize it's nowhere to be found. But next week, I'm either going to do the Terrornauts from 1967 or The Day Mars Invaded Earth from 1963. I feel like getting in the sci-fi mood, so I'm picking something vintage from the 60s. The Day That Mars Invaded Earth is, it's in black and white. It's a classic. You can find both of those movies for free online if you want to watch it before that episode airs. And with that being said, you can find our show on Facebook at Cult Classic Mania. It's just facebook.com/Cult Classic Mania. You can find me on Instagram. My name is Matthew, and my Instagram handle is Cult Classic Matthew. And you can also vote on our Facebook page on what movies you want to see next. Like I said, next week I'm either deciding on doing the Terrornauts or The Day Mars Invaded Earth. And you can go ahead and vote on my Facebook or my Instagram if you're interested. And with that, I am your host, Matthew, and this has been another installment of Cult Classic Mania. I will talk to you all next week.
I wanna believe